Namaste, viewers. Welcome to Jaipur Dialogue USA. Today, we are going to talk about a very explosive and remarkably important event. And the event is related to coronavirus, Wuhan virus, regardless of what you want to call it. I have two gentlemen here, Mr. Amit Bagaria and Mr. Savio Rodrigues. They have written an outstanding book, Modi Stole My Mask. And they were recently, as part of full disclosure, on Jaipur Dialogue India, where they had a massive audience listening to their point of view and about the book. We are JD USA, a new program that we have started with a clear purpose that we have to carry forward the narrative that India is constantly afflicted with. I remember when the pandemic hit, the Western media was very concerned, if I may say, quote unquote, what will happen in India? Because it has so many people, such high density. How will India handle this situation? And if India were to be afflicted, how will it affect the world? That concern looked very bizarre to me. I said, first worry about yourself. Why worry about India right now? However, to put the record straight, India handled its first wave remarkably well. And then India suddenly was the example of how to handle that. At that time, precisely, United States, where I live in New York, we were going through hell. The number of deaths were more than 4,000 a day, and New York hospitals were full of dead bodies, unclaimed. That was a real disaster. Juxtapose it. US developed vaccines and got into the second wave, and the curves were flattened, but in India, it burst out, and which became a global story of attacking and blaming Modi for having failed. And that's truly remarkable, because if I have been following the data virtually constantly, and there is something which I made a note of it today itself, that in terms of a pure comparison, the world has suffered 4 million deaths on account of Wuhan virus, as I still prefer to call it, and a total number of cases of 185 million. India has 408,000 deaths with 30.8 million cases. United States, 606,000 deaths and 33.8 million deaths, but India was the villain. Modi was the villain. So to welcome Savio and Amit ji in this show, and first thing that I wanted to ask was, how did you hit upon the idea? The truth must be told. So what inspired you to get going with the book, which I think everybody must read? Because this event is of a gigantic impact on the world economies, peoples. Trillions of dollars have evaporated. Millions of lives have been lost. For petty crimes, people go to jail. And I have always said that the global leadership has an onerous responsibility and a commitment to tell it to its people who did it, why, and who benefited from it all. So Savio, I'll request you to take the first shot at it before I go to Amit ji. You are mute.
Thank you, Vibhuti, for inviting me onto your program once again. It's always a pleasure to be on it. Jaipur Dialogues is a discussion I love to partake in, both in US and India. Coming back to the idea of the book, well, I was already investigating the coronavirus, as you would have seen from our reportage for the last 18 odd months, tracking the origin of the coronavirus, looking at China, looking at the World Health Organization's religion of duty. Around the same time, a couple of months ago, Amit and I got in touch over social media platform Twitter. And Amit sent me an article which revolved around certain aspects of which features in the book as well. And I was majorly impressed by that article. And I'm not somebody...
Can I interrupt for a second here? Can I interrupt? there is one of you have the audio which there is a crackle sound coming in. So I don't know which one of you has it, but if you just mute yourself, then we will know where it is coming from. It's at your end, Savio. You muted and that thing went away. So just.
Okay. Can you get it now?
Yes, I can get it now. It is still tiny little bit, but much less.
Okay, so you want me to leave and come back in?
Yeah, why not?
Amit
Yeah, Amit, you can get going with that. Definitely. Because the sound is constantly bothersome. So come back to
sure,
the
book. So like Savio was saying, actually, I had already started writing the book before Savio became a co-author. And Vibhuti, frankly, the reason why I started writing the book, one is that I'm an author and always looking at interesting topics to write. But more important than that is that on all my social media chats, like WhatsApp chats, etc., there were a lot of anti-Modi messages being floated around. And, I didn't pay much attention to them until one day I had posted something positive, some kind of data comparison. And my brother, who was part of 4 of those groups, said, I was a Modi supporter and I'm not anymore. So please stop posting any pro-Modi stuff on these groups. I was shocked. I was like, okay, you're not a Modi supporter anymore, but I am. If you can post anti-Modi stuff, why can't I post pro-Modi stuff? Anyway, I ignored that also. And just 3 days later or 4 days later, on another group, my son posted anti-Modi stuff and he said, I made a grave error in voting for Narendra Modi in 2014 and 19, and I regret it, and I'm never going to do it again. So I think that was the inspiration to actually start writing the book. And like Savio was saying, I had written 2 articles which are sort of connected with the book, which Savio published in Goa Chronicle. And after publishing those 2 articles, then Savio said, "Can I also co-author the book? Can I become a co-author?" And I said, "Yeah, you're most welcome." And then it was a collaboration.
Excellent. However, there is one thing very important is that as the facts and the fiction, they have always been brought about under a confluence here, the narrative building, This is very important. The facts began to emerge. In these matters, things don't happen overnight. The things have to be brought out. So tell me one thing about that. What facts that you discovered in your research that astounded you, shocked you, and what was bleeding obvious?
So there were like many facts. Like you just gave the US versus India figures. Now, when you do comparisons, when you do comparisons of the cases per million or the deaths per million, and we compared 20 largest countries, the 20 most affected countries, and we realized that India was not amongst the 16 most affected countries. India was number 17 on those parameters.
Right.
More importantly, Vibhuti, I think the biggest and most important fact was that in these 20 countries, the peak of cases between the first wave and the second wave, the ratio was 1.66, the average ratio. Whereas in India, the ratio of second wave peak versus first wave peak was 4.23. So in India, the second wave was not a wave; it was a tsunami. It was completely unexpected. And I'll quote 2 people here. Dr. Anthony Fauci, he said that no one in the world could have predicted such a high number. And the second person I'll quote is Adar Poonawalla, the owner of Serum Institute of India, the largest vaccine manufacturer in India. He said even God couldn't have predicted this.
Wow. Even God could not have predicted it. So, Savio, welcome back. I'm glad we removed the shackle. The important part is again, simple. It's a very serious issue. And I must share with you that just about the time when the World Health Organization declared this as a pandemic, On my local US show, I had one Dr. Sharma, who is the frontline fighter against COVID in his hospital, and chief of medicine in charge of ICU, who expanded the ICU capacity from 20 to 43, I believe. But it's very interesting that when we talked about it as a common sense point of view, he made a couple of interesting observations. One of the observations was rather strong. That in America he was able to do that was a very brave attempt by him when he said that Dr. Fauci is misleading the people. That was very powerful. And the fact it didn't seem to be a bat driven wet market theory. But I must surprise you by saying again today that yesterday on my Long Island news, I heard the narrator was saying that the scientific community still believes that it all happened in a wet market. So the narrative building about this one is very strong. The media, the politics, the economics of it plays a big role. So Savio, at what point in time you began to believe that there is something not okay about it, seriously flawed and wrong, and people were barking up the wrong tree to identify and drive us to the passage in which your entire focus was that that's the crime scene, the Wuhan lab. Because every crime has a spot it begins with. It benefits somebody. To whom did it benefit? Let's talk about that, Savio.
Well, actually, I would actually say that it was December 31st, 2019, when I actually got interested in the COVID pandemic itself. It was not COVID pandemic then. It was a novel coronavirus that they were terming it as. And that's the time China reported the matter to the World Health Organization. And I have been kind of tracking the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, for many years right now, since his time at the health minister in Ethiopia. So I kept a track on it. I didn't pay much attention. It was when the activities in January and February. So at the end of Jan 30th, they decided to announce that it was a public health emergency of international concern. And of course, they expected the world to adhere to that, which they did blame the world afterwards, saying that countries did not adhere to our highest level emergency call, which was the public health emergency of international concern. It was when they termed it or categorized it as a pandemic on March 11th, when the world suddenly woke up and started to take it seriously. And that's why there were lockdowns all over the world, most parts of the world actually, in the month of March. And that's when people started to get serious about it. Now, the entire focus, what's very important to understand is that the World Health Organization, China, want to tell the world that this has not come out from the Wuhan lab. It has come out of the wet market. It's a bad coronavirus. Interestingly, there were two scientists from China that had written a paper way back on February 7th, 2020. They're known as the Shao brothers. And within 24 hours, they had to take that particular piece of research down. And that research basically spoke about the fact that it could not have been possible from the Wuhan wet market, because the Wuhan wet market does not sell bats and pangolins. They sell everything else but bats and pangolins. So that's when I started to get into it more seriously. And then I started to track the source. Now, you must understand that at different stages, you have the army, that's the PLA, working with the Wuhan virology lab. And they've been working on what would consider to be bioweaponry way back from 1984, when they got seriously interested in it. Even in 2017, one of the courses that they had at their defense university talks about genetic mutation via ethnicity. So they keep talking about it. They've been dabbling with it. The interesting aspect is simultaneously around the same time, you had the US also looking at the gain of function research, which had gone on for a very long time. And after that, you had the administration, the government wanting to put an end to it. So the gain of function research stopped in America, but it had to go somewhere else. That's the time they moved most of the information and the sciences to China at that point of time. And that is why you have NIH that has funded Professor Xi Jinping's studies into the bad coronaviruses. And that's where this entire nexus actually starts off. So you have the rogue elements in the US that have the idea and have been working on gain of research for a long time. Not only the US, if you look at Porton Down is the UK lab as well. They are also quite famous for dealing with what you call gain of function research and very high level viruses and bacteria. So you have an amalgamation of foreign powers that are actually working on bioweapons. And then you have China and PLA's determination to score higher than the West in war. So they had to do something that was completely different from the rest of the world. So what I believe happened is that they did create a virus that was lethal by giving it the spike proteins that was required, that allowed it to jump from animals to humans, and that somehow either deliberately or not deliberately leaked out from that lab. And when it leaked out from that lab, you must understand that the first four cases that happened in China were reported to the PLA hospital, which is the military hospital once again. Now, if the cases originated in the Wuhan market, then they would have gone to the civilian hospitals. The mere fact that the first cases go into the military hospital actually bring about the fact that there must have been some amount of military interference or a sort of a cover up that they needed to have done in order for it not to show that it had something to do with the Wuhan lab. Because the Wuhan virology lab is controlled by the military, the PLA of China. Now, after that happened, the interesting aspect is what comes out in Dr. Stephen Key's report, which states that the metro line 2 became the most important aspect of the transmission of people who could have been infected. So first you have the PLA hospital that's on the line. You have the Wuhan virology lab on the same metro line. You have the seafood market on the same metro line, as in people use the same metro line. And then you have the railway station and the bus station that people use on that same metro line. But most importantly, it is the airport that is on the same metro line. So you have people who are infected using the metro line and leaving the country. Now, on Jan 23rd, China put out two very important notifications. The first notification restricted travel from Wuhan to the rest of China, but did not stop travel from China to the rest of the world. And the second notification, which they sent out to all the health centers in all provinces of China, was to use traditional Chinese medicines to deal with this new kind of pneumonia that had come out. And that's really where this entire investigation goes on. And that's where Amit and I will be writing about in our second book. But we do mention about the fact that it's a bioweapon in Modi Stole My Mask.
I'll just add one thing here,
Please.
Vibhuti. It's a question, okay? Now, somebody may call it a conspiracy theory or whatever, but my question is, why is it that the coronavirus affects certain ethnicities more than others? Why does it affect Latinos, Hispanics, and blacks more than whites or Asians? What is the DNA similarity between Latinos and blacks? I don't think there are any. I'm not a DNA expert, but I don't think that there are similarities between Hispanics and blacks. So why does it affect these two ethnicities more? And I have a theory about this. My theory about this is that South America, most of the South American countries and most of the African countries, their economies are already badly damaged. Therefore, by sending a bioweapon to these two continents, you're damaging their economies further, which will make them want to borrow more money. And who's going to be the lender? It's going to be China. And when China comes as a lender, and when these countries are unable to pay their loans, China will convert these loans to ownership stakes and take over these two continents.
That's a very interesting exposition and realization that you have had. And my also inquiry also is about the fact that out of 4 million deaths that the world has experienced, two of the largest number of deaths, almost 25%, is happening in the US and India. 606,000 in US, 408,000 in India, which is more than a million. It is almost 25% of the deaths. So I will add a further element to this, your next book's investigation, is that how is it that India and the United States were hit the hardest? And I have a theory for that. That's a geopolitical conspiracy or fact that you can say. That if we just recall the camera, rewind the tape, there were two world leaders, India's Modi and United States Trump. They took on China head on politically. They called President Xi out. President Xi had virtually sabotaged Mr. Modi's peaceful initiatives of meeting any number of times, and India had really rebuffed the Galwan incident and entire border issue, that skirmish that happened. I'm deliberately calling it skirmish and not a war because it was limited engagement. And the United States, Mr. Trump was calling out China for its violations of international norms, tariff war, and whatever else. Look what happened. Suddenly, you have an element that seeps into the two countries. Doesn't happen in Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka in the same way that happened in India. And so that is truly remarkable, that how a bioweapon was unleashed to really derail the two economies, the world's largest powerful economy and the emerging most powerful economy, which would have become the center of manufacturing post-China debacle. The world doesn't trust China. It operates under fear. So share your thoughts on this, either one.
So also you look at it, you're very correct in saying the US and India have been most affected. But within the US, in terms of percentage of deaths, the highest have been in Hispanics and blacks. In India, in terms of percentage, the highest have been in Maharashtra and South India. Now, why is that? Because Maharashtra and South India have contributed the maximum to GDP growth in India in the last 4 decades, and also have perhaps, without offending others, perhaps the higher intelligence, more intelligent people in these regions. So it just again starts putting doubts in our mind as to, are the targets chosen carefully? Are you trying to wipe out certain populations because that will affect those countries that you're targeting?
Savio, your thoughts?
Well, I'm convinced about one thing, that it is certainly a bioweapon. And it's about time that the world, will recognize the fact that this is a bioweapon. And there has been talks that have started with global leaders actually looking at it. So it's not only the involvement of China. China is really the face. China is really the greed. China is really the player that had the desire to execute this bioweapon. But there are ancillary players around that will actually benefit out of this entire exercises. And that's the very strong pharma lobby itself, number one. Number two, it is people who are going to use the pandemic to play what Amit and I call as the pandemic, to gain political advantages in countries that they might need to. For example, I was in talks with somebody who's close to the president of Tunisia, and we were talking about how the health crisis is actually escalating in Tunisia, and how they're looking at the rest of the world to actually come and help them. So you see that happening in Japan. You're going to see it in other nations as well. You're seeing a spike in cases in the UK. You're seeing a spike in cases in Russia. But you're not seeing any spike of cases as far as China is concerned, right? You're hearing 12 cases, 20 cases, 30 cases. In UK, you're hearing 25,000 cases in a day. Tunisia, you're looking at 16,000 cases in a day. Japan has seen a sudden spike. So China has actually played this so well and planned it so well that it's got the cartel of the farmer lobby to actually back it. It's got the World Health Organization to back it, and they've been planning it since the time Margaret Chan has been around. The first SARS was probably just an experiment for the farmer lobby and China, and then now you have what you have in China, in the World Health Organization is Dr. Tedros, because Dr. Tedros is the one guy who had created the timeline of the coronavirus and the pandemic right from the time they got the first case. And then 4 months later, he alters that entire timeline to suit the narrative of China. Now, there cannot be any more evidence that's so complacent and so connecting as this. That an organization, a global organization, has altered a timeline that it is its first set and put it out and made it public, and then they alter the timeline and make that timeline public, saying that we are within our rights to alter the timeline. How can you alter a timeline that you have started on the case? The World Health Organization is pandering to China. The United Nations has been pandering to China. Till now, nobody is going to question China. The real question to China will come when the economic impact starts to happen, and that's going to set in another 6 months. Because world over, there's not going to be money in the poor countries. And Sri Lanka right now is a classic example. And Sri Lanka is not even hit by the pandemic. Yet China is acquiring certain aspects of Sri Lanka by giving them loans, right? It's same going to happen in Africa. It's same going to happen to certain CIS countries. And the same is going to happen to certain countries in Asia. So China has planned it out. China wants global dominion. China definitely has an upper hand as far as the COVID pandemic is concerned when it comes to the US. US and China are linked to the pandemic. It's linked not by nations in this case, but certain people with vested interest in the US that are working with China in order to foster or to take forward this pandemic. There is no new normal anymore, and there's never going to be a new normal for the next couple of years. This is the new normal. This is the way they want you to live. And as long as the world opens their eyes to the truth, what China has done has brought war into your homes, and it's completely destroyed normal living. You see what happened when people were allowed to go out free? They went out to places like Manali. They've gone to Lonavala, and they've just broken free. That is what the virus is. That is what the pandemic has done. It's made people frustrated. There will be a point when people will get so frustrated in their countries that they'll take to the streets just to stop these lockdowns, just to stop these vaccinations, and said we've had enough of it. And that's what China wants.
That's what
And
China wants. Yeah, I remember. Just one moment, Amit.
Yeah.
I remember. You have been in the forefront of challenging Dr. Tedros through Twitter, invited him to come on your channel and have a free conversation. I also remember he agreed, and
Yeah.
I remember tweeting you, "Do you really believe he will come?" And he did, right?
No, he did.
Right? He did.
No, yeah, he did. In fact, he didn't come on my channel. I was invited to question him at the global conference that he does online.
Okay.
So I'm invited every time, and I get an opportunity to ask him a question. So in that span of 10 days, I got a chance to ask him 3 questions. So it's only a question that's asked and then he replies. So there's no dialogue, right? So in most of the cases, and I'll tell you what he said, he blamed the world for the problems that they are in, and that is exactly what the World Health Organization is going to do. You see, intrinsically what he has said is that we had called for the public health emergency of international concern on January 30th. The World Health Organization's spokesperson even told me, Savio, PHEIC is the last and the final call for seriousness. In the sense, that's the final call. So I said, then why did you categorize it as a pandemic on March 11th? There's no, that's not a final warning. That's just a categorization, right? So when you called it public health emergency, nobody cared about it. So think about it. The actual viruses started to move in China not on December 30th. It started way sometime in November. Okay, by official data. So you have November, you have December, you have January, you have February, and then you have the first 2 weeks of March. Till that time, the virus is roaming all around the world, and then you call a pandemic, and then you go for a lockdown. But the other interesting thing you must keep in mind, and this is what Amit and I, are working on, and Amit doesn't have that data, but I'll share it with him later. Why is it that the first wave was easily dealt with? And what triggered the second wave? And that's exactly what you will find in our book.
Yes.
And even in the new book, what triggered it? You see, even now, if you look at Tunisia or you look at Japan, they managed to deal with the crisis pretty well the first time. Suddenly, there's been a resurgence of cases. So what is the virus doing? The virus must be mutating in some pattern. Something is causing the virus to mutate. And that's exactly why I'm saying it's genetically modified. Through ethnicity was one of the studies that they used to do. I am pretty sure that it is a smart virus. The variants that you are seeing are mutated variants. And there has to be a serious investigation because this is not going to stop.
That's scary, and it's a very serious warning to the people around us. And Amitji, I will seek to know more about one element. And then second wave in India was blamed everything on Modi. Whether it was related to Kumbh Mela, election campaign, remdesivir, vaccine shortage, whatever, oxygen shortage, it was all blamed on Modi. Therefore, your title of your book is very important. The Modi Stole My Mask. Is share something about the hard facts about these elements that, what you have very smartly called the pandemic and tsunami.
Sure.
How the people of India themselves hurt themselves. Instead of blaming the government for everything, there is an element of shared responsibility. That's what democracy and way of life is all about. Your thoughts on that?
Sure. So before I answer this question, Vibhuti, one other aspect, that when you say people blamed Modi, it's the job of opposition politicians to blame their opponent.
Mm-hmm.
So the opposition politicians are not fully wrong in blaming Modi for it. Similarly, was the case of the Democratic Party in the US blaming Trump for it, right? But what about the media? How come the media in both the US and in India has not blamed China,
Correct.
but instead blamed the heads of government during those times?
Yes.
That is a big question. Has this media been bought by China?
You have said something very important, being bought. We know now, and we are all, seemingly educated and aware, is that China is definitely making serious inroads in virtually owning up WHO and many other international organizations to build its own narrative. So media is one. I'm surprised about how the opposition sold out.
Vibhuti, I'll share something with both you and Amit. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm not going to take any names, but recently I was approached by somebody who has a very great connection with China and Chinese media and CPC itself from China itself. Okay? So I interacted with this person. This person's main 90% of that entire conversation with this person that somehow is linked to China revolved around the fact that my investigations against China are misplaced. China and Chinese people are good. people. The government is good. The government is better than India. And the real culprit to the situation in India is Narendra Modi. Okay? So I heard this person out, Amit. It's funny because it represents the media and also was somebody that used to be with a very powerful media in China. And this person went on and went on for about 45 minutes explaining to me the virtues of China and the pandemic and how the Wuhan lab cannot create such a virus. And that various other places, this is created not in Wuhan, it could have been created in the US, it could have been created in the UK, and all these things. And I heard everything. So I just asked this person one thing. I said, great, you're the cat's whiskers, you know everything, and you know everything is right. Now, can you please get me an interview with the CCP and with Professor Xi Jinping? If you can do that, then I'd like to ask them the questions, number one. Number two is me and my colleague Amit Bagaria would like to come into China and go to the Wuhan lab and investigate this because you have so much of power with what you're saying. Then make it possible without China arresting Amit and me when we want to go to China and investigate. If you can do that, I can believe it. Now, why am I telling you this story? Because Goa Chronicle is of no consequence as far as the larger game plan is concerned, right? If you look at it from a media perspective. But we are banned in China, right? We've been blocked. We are being started to be targeted by people who are coming and meeting us and talking to us with regards to pro-China stories, saying that China is not the villain, it is the US or the UK that's the villain. You need to investigate further. And most importantly, they want us to target Modi. That person actually told me
and they're so open about it.
That person told me Modi has sold himself. I said, really? And you have evidence of this? That's the problem. Unfortunately, what they have not understood is that you're dealing with two crackpots, Amit and me. We are built differently. You know, we are not.
To answer your question, Vibhuti.
Yeah.
The number of cases in the second wave started in the first week of March.
Right.
The number of cases went up 32.76 times between the 1st of March and the 30th of April. 32.76 times in 60 days. Whereas if you look at the average of the top 20 countries, it was 4.34 in 60 days, right? So we were like 7.5 times higher than the average of the 20 countries. Now, when you talk about Kumbh Mela and the elections, let me tell you which states had the highest rise in cases. Number 1, Bihar. Number 2, Uttar Pradesh. Number 3, Andhra Pradesh. Number 4, Uttarakhand, where the Kumbh Mela was, sure. Number 5, Jharkhand. Number 6, Assam. Number 7, Delhi. Number 8, Rajasthan. None of these states had elections. As far as the Kumbh Mela is concerned, we've written in the first chapter of the book that we think, Savio and I think, that the Kumbh Mela should not have been held. But blaming the elections, data proves that the elections did not cause the highest rise in cases because the states that were, that the 4 states that went through the elections were not the ones that had the highest rise.
That's so amazing. Like as the saying goes that, when you investigate a crime, it takes time. The onus to prove something, the democratic process of you are not guilty until proven so, the enemies of democracy and evil, they take advantage of the compassion of the societies and the compassion of the law.
There's an op-ed piece today.
Yeah.
Today, there is an op-ed piece in the Times of India, which says UP elections are coming and there's going to be a third wave connected with that. It's already been predicted before it's happened.
That's right.
That UP elections are going to cause the third wave. Not Kerala. Not Kerala and Maharashtra put together for the last 1 week. Savio, if I'm not wrong, the number is 55%, right? 55% of cases in India are coming only from these 2 states. They won't talk about it because these are non-BJP governments.
And this is an eerie irony and similarity that even in the US, the states that had the preponderance of massive cases in were 5 states that were Democratic Party controlled states. One of the governors even got Emmy Award for his rendition of the reports of the daily pandemic that was happening. It is truly amazing that how the collusion that has happened between the left, the media, and how somebody is controlling the entire narratives. Because when I heard the phrase, Dr. Burks, who have made this statement, and I was rather astounded. I'm not able to still figure out what it is. And if you can educate and you can give your thought, I'll be very happy. She said that we are adopting a liberal approach to mortality. What exactly did she mean by that? The liberal approach to mortality. It's just a quote of hers. And I picked it up from one of the stories that came in, that she said we are adopting a liberal approach to mortality. Is it the fact that people were dying, the heart attacks and diabetes cases were also plugged in or taken away? What does it mean? What do you think? I'm not asking you to give the exact answer. But when you hear that phrase, what do you feel about that?
I don't know what to make of the phrase, but there's an interesting study that came out from the University of Washington, which has got a department called the Institute of Health Metrics Evaluation, which said that all countries in the world have underreported deaths. All countries in the world. And they actually gave a list of 20 countries, and they gave a ratio of what percentage the deaths were underreported, and that included the US. I'll give you an interesting statistic, Vibhuti, about the US. Okay. Right. Talking about liberals and the left liberal ecosystem. The US reported 46,239 average daily cases during Trump's presidency. After Biden came in, until May 11th, when this data was captured, until May 31st, the average number of cases were 120,113. So actually, it was 2.6 times
more
than during Trump. And yet it was Trump who got blamed and Biden who got congratulated for fighting the pandemic very well. I just don't understand. And the bigger shocker is, it's not the bought out media that writes this. It's about the people who read it and believe it. Where are their brains? Why don't they understand that there are numbers that prove something?
When you are driven by hate, then you don't see logic. And hate has no moral justification to it, that I know.
Yeah.
So, Savio, this is a very important part. You guys have demystified the entire blame game. And the important part is people are talking about third wave. In the US, they are talking about November to be a very critical month, because that's a time when the normal flu comes in. We would not know whether you are hit by Wuhan or you are hit by normal flu. So people are really concerned about how to discern the illnesses, discovery of illnesses, whether which flu vaccine normal. Now, I've taken both Pfizer shots, but in November, I will be taking the normal flu shot, but we will not know what will be hitting us. So the medical system is under heavy strain in the US. And believe it or not, a lot of people in India, or the press and the media, commented about poor medical infrastructure in India. But the first wave deaths that have happened, and the US still leads India by 200,000 plus deaths, is a very superior health infrastructure. So it is nothing to do with the health infrastructure. It is all to do with the way how the cases were handled, the shortages were created. When I remember the number of cases, they were saying, can you send us some oxygen, oxygenated, whatever that thing was known as. But the question here is, again, who benefited from it all? There is a definite bioweapon thing, because we know now that this particular virus, the gain of function treatment part of it, was treated and experimented on human mice. So we know that. So therefore, the potential to have created that artificially is very high. And I am not to give any flippant thing, But I'm definitely reminded of Mission Impossible 2, where it was all about the virus and the pharma industry. Forget about the theatrics. But look at the movie from that point of view, and several people who saw it says, "My God, that's what is happening." Your thoughts on this?
Well, I certainly, like I said earlier as well, I certainly believe it's a bioweapon. We are currently, the world is facing a bio war. We're not sure how it's going to end. We don't know what's going to be the next move, but we have to at least get our basics correct. Now, when people talk about health infrastructure, when they talk about India has failed because of health infrastructure, yes, of course, India's health infrastructure is not as good as America or most parts of the Western world, and we understand that, we accept that. But then the world, the country with the best infrastructure in the world, also faltered, which is the US. So I don't think it has anything to do with infrastructure. I think it has to do with an ability to understand what the crisis is and to contain it in a manner and deal with it responsibly. Now, a lot of people don't have been failing in the fact that, if you look at the first wave and how we went about it, there were actually great containment ideas created. People were restricted. There was a lockdown, and people were, the areas that had most number of cases were contained. In the second When the second wave happened, and when there was a little bit of lackadaisical attitude that set in, you had people going completely berserk as far as COVID protocols were concerned, adherence to COVID protocols were concerned. I mean, people were out partying, people were out traveling, people were out, for various other reasons. You could look at the cases that happened in Maharashtra, you can look at the cases that happened in Delhi, and most of all, you had the farmer protest. And here, nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about the farmer protests. But if you look at the cases in the areas where the farmer protests were taking place, that's the areas that you saw spike in cases. Bollywood was another one, and Amit will tell you all about how Bollywood's contributed to the second wave. The fact of the matter is, we cannot let our guard down. That's what I'm saying. The whole idea is we do not know how this virus is mutating. Even the vaccines that you have might be able to create a protective cover, but there is no 100% efficacy in
Right.
any of it.
Right.
So you don't know. So the idea is we are not living a normal that existed prior to December 30th, 2019. We are now in a normal which will be normal for us for the next couple of years. It has destroyed lives. We are not even seeing it. We don't talk about the number of people who have died, the families, what are they going through? Cases where young children, 6-month-old girl lost both her parents, has to live with the grandparents right now. We are not even talking about that. What are we talking about in media? Oh my God, India has got so much of deaths, and the Hindu majority government is cremating so many people, but they're not giving the real figures. What about the people who have died? What about their families? What about the economies of a man who was earning for his family, and now the family doesn't have an economic source? Who's going to take care of them? When a case goes to the court, the government says we cannot decide what we're going to pay these people. The demand was for 4 lakhs per person. 4 lakhs per person into 4 lakh deaths so far is a huge amount and of strain on the government. Who's going to pay for the deaths? China? Shouldn't China be made accountable? It destroyed our lives. I mean, nobody was aware of what was going to happen.
Sure.
Look at the kids today. Are they in school? Are they out playing? You've left them at home to be online. So no matter which way you want to look at it, the fact of the matter is this bioweapon has destroyed lives, millions of lives. We've not even
Yes.
seen the impact. And that is why there can be no business with China or the Chinese people. We have to put an end to China relationships immediately. If not through the government, then the people of India must boycott China in totality. This is not going to end, and I'm mark my words. I'm normally not wrong on my analysis. This is the new normal. What we are living today, you and I.
Yes.
This is the new normal,
It is
and
a
it's
new
not fair
normal.
to the people.
Yeah, you are right. I mean, a friend of mine just yesterday, he has taken 2 shots and he was affected by the Delta variant. He is now in isolation by himself. He had both shots. I was in a grocery store yesterday, a big grocery store, and I found hundreds of people who were not even wearing the mask. So I was going to the pharmacy and I asked, has the rule changed? Because I was having the mask. He said the rule had been relaxed, but it's cautious to be wise. And you better have your mask on, because this is what is important for people of India to remember, that the third wave or any variant, whatever will come, majority of the effort to not be afflicted lies with us. Relying on the famous dialogue that Zindagi or Maut Upar Wale ke haath mein hai jahan pana, I always tell people that even if you have a long life, you don't need to test your lifeline by standing in front of a running train. You know, what, even if you survive, what kind of a life would you be living? So the question is, in exercising a local wisdom, that you have to exercise caution. And Savio, you are right. Life is not going to be the same again. It is not going to be the same, because you can't trust anything anymore. And the bioweapon thing is really serious, and we have to be cautious. So, in the absence of enough time, and I think this particular conversation needs a lot more time and a lot more analysis to getting to the fact there is a geopolitical element of that. And I'm sincerely believing that, you have seen that certain groups of people have behaved in a particular way. The Democratic Party in the US, the opposition in India, they have behaved in a particular way that leaves you wondering. The way media has behaved. So 110, 20,000 cases is not a problem under Biden, but 40,000 under Trump was. The fact that people were not cautious in India for the second wave to happen is Modi's fault. It's not people's fault. There has to be a greater awareness and more conversation on these matters. So, in the paucity of time, our channel is a new channel. So I would appeal to the viewers and everybody else to like, subscribe, share, and let us help in recreating the narrative. Modi stole my mask. Do buy, do read, because the truth needs to be known. In India, for Indians and by the Indians, whether we are living in any part of the world. And you guys have done an awesome book, and when you are coming with your second book, I would also say one more thing. And I believe that you have talked about how China has to be held accountable. The question is, how must the villain or the perpetrators of this crime be held accountable, be it China, be it India, be it United States? What must be done to inspire the people's faith in institutions that control us? Your word, final word by both of you on this subject.
Amit, go ahead.
So, the difficulty, Vibhuti, is that I don't think governments are going to take any action against China, because diplomatically you can't do that. Number one. Number two, they are now more or less the world's most powerful economy. Can a government ban import of goods from China? Can the Indian government do it? I don't think so. So I think, like Savio said, it has to be a people's movement. And one of the things we've talked about, although we've not actioned it, is that if there can be an organization like an NGO created with even only just 2% of the people who died, a representative of somebody who's lost their life, a family member or a friend, only 2%, that will become an extremely powerful movement, which can then take China to the International Court of Justice in a criminal lawsuit against Xi Jinping to be tried as a war criminal. I remember the Yugoslav, I'm forgetting the name of the person, the Yugoslav president.
Milosevic or something like that.
Milosevic, yeah. Milosevic was tried as a war criminal.
Yes.
For doing not even 2% of what Xi Jinping has done, right? And then he was punished for it. Of course, that was done because the US government did it. Here, I don't think the US government, the Indian government, any government has the power or the guts to take action. So, can there be a people's movement? Can people get together and fight a criminal lawsuit against China? Crowdfunded.
As the saying goes, people walk in criminal indictments and things like that. You are not guilty until proven. So, do you think, Savio, your last word before we end the show today is?
Well, I think China has to be made accountable one way or the other, and it has to be a people's movement. It has to be a people's movement from global regions. We have to get people all together who have been impacted by the pandemic. But most importantly, what we need to understand is that right now we have to figure out collectively how to deal with the bioweapon, pull all our resources together, save lives, inform as many people as we can, save as many people as we can, and be prepared for the next onslaught or the next variant of this pandemic, or accept the fact that this is the new normal and this is the way we're going to live. Because what we don't know is whether the next variants will target our children or not. We've seen them start at the elderly level, the senior citizen level. Then you see it go from 18 to 60 years of age. And now there is talk about the fact that it could impact children as well. Now, obviously, there is a plan. It's not just this virus that has come out of a lab. It's this virus that's taking different forms. It's getting, the vaccines are going ahead, creating their own little, chain reactions to the virus, and the virus then is further mutating because maybe it's learned how to beat the vaccines itself. It's a smart virus, and I think we as people need to accept this fact and understand that we are fighting a bio war. And in a bio war, there has to be contingency plans by nations for its people, because the worst that's going to happen is not the health crisis. The health crisis is a mere start to your problems. It is the economic crisis that will go beyond health, and people will go completely berserk. It will be a complete anarchy, and that's about to happen.
That's
Also,
thank you very much.
I don't know, Vibhuti and Savio, if both of you are aware of this fact. I was in a little get together this afternoon, and a lot of people were reporting of after symptoms that their friends or relatives are experiencing. People are losing eyesight 1 month after getting a negative report. People are getting tired just climbing 3 steps in a staircase. Okay, people have lost their sense of smell, or they are smelling horrible things. For example, people are smelling naphtha in a lot of things. They're not able to drink coffee because they're smelling naphtha there, etc., etc. There are a lot of after effects that are coming into light after a person has been supposedly cured of COVID-19. So, the whole thing of being a genetically derived virus, I mean, who knows what else this virus is going to do even after a person has been declared COVID negative.
No, that is a very important point, because it happens with every allopathic medicine. Because if you begin to hear and pay attention to the likely side effects of any particular allopathic medicine we take, you might be tempted to say, I would rather live with what I know rather than live with the consequences. That's the reason when you have a success rate of 90%, that 10% people are likely to have different effect. If 70%, 80% is not 100%, as we rightly said. So it is no shocker that even in FDA-approved drugs, you have the potentiality of some adverse effects happening. Then you treat for that adverse effect. So that is something which is really scary, particularly when emergency use of the vaccines have been allowed, but not the FDA approved. They are still seeking. Now they are talking about the third dose. the booster dose by Pfizer. They're talking about children coming up. So there is a whole lot of play going on, but it depends a lot on us now as an individual. The government do what they have to do. The precaution that we have to take individually is important. And you have pointed out a very important point, that the economic damage that is happening is one part of the story. The individual damages that are happening to families, that will be a scar that will live forever. So, a child that lost her parents, or anybody, like I know a doctor, Indian doctor, he had to go through hell and he died eventually, who was on the front line of the battle with them. So it is a very serious kind of scenario, and we have to be careful about it. Thank you very much for joining today. And we need to talk about the narrative more. Viewers in the US, like, subscribe, and share the video. Let's create a better narrative. Let's create the honest narrative and not give in to the temptation or the browbeating of those who flex their muscles. That's who we are. So thank you.
Thank you for
Hind,
having me.
and
Jai Hind.
Satyamev Jayate, as I always say. Thank you very much, both of you.
Bye-bye.